I got accepted into the nation's top university alongside my childhood love, the campus queen Serafina. But she switched to a lower-ranked southern university, all to chase after a boy she secretly obsessed over. Serafina was confident I'd abandon my dreams for her and follow south. Instead, I quietly prepared documents behind her back and applied to an elite overseas university. Since I wasn't the only one in her heart, I no longer wanted her either. The acceptance letter to Cambridge arrived on a rain-soaked Tuesday morning, hidden beneath a stack of bills my mother handed me with trembling fingers. My heart should have soared. This was everything I'd worked for, sacrificed for, dreamed of since I was 12 years old. Instead, I felt nothing but cold, bitter satisfaction. Serafina didn't know. She was probably at that moment sitting in some cafe with her new obsession, Kieran, planning their romantic university life together in the South. The thought made my stomach churn with a mixture of rage and heartbreak that I'd been carrying for weeks. Just 3 months ago, we were the golden couple of Westfield Academy. Everyone said we were destined to be together forever, childhood sweethearts who would marry after graduation and live happily ever after. I believed it too. God, how naive I was. The betrayal started small. A missed date here, a forgotten anniversary there. Then came the lies about study groups that never existed, the mysterious phone calls she'd take in hushed whispers, walking away from me mid-conversation, but it was the university application that shattered everything. "I'm changing my choice," she'd announced casually over lunch, not even looking up from her phone. "Southern Valley University has a better atmosphere for me." Southern Valley University, a third-tier institution that barely cracked the top 100 rankings. When I pressed her for reasons, she stumbled through excuses about wanting a different experience and exploring new opportunities. But I knew the truth. I'd seen her staring at Kieran across the cafeteria, her eyes following his every move like he was some kind of magnetic force. Kieran, the quiet, unremarkable boy who sat in the corner of our literature class, scribbling in notebooks and avoiding eye contact. I never understood what she saw in him until I realized I was looking at it all wrong. It wasn't what she saw in him, it was what she imagined he could become in her fantasy. "You'll come with me, won't you?" she'd asked, finally looking up with those stunning green eyes that once made my heart skip beats. Now they just looked calculating. "We always said we'd go to university together." The expectation in her voice was what broke me completely. She wasn't asking, she was telling. She'd already made her choice, rearranged both our futures to accommodate her whims, and simply expected me to fall in line like I always had before. But I wasn't the same lovesick fool who used to rearrange his entire schedule just to walk her to class. 3 years of being her second choice had taught me something valuable. Self-respect has a price, and I was finally wealthy enough to afford it, so I smiled, nodded, and lied. "Of course, Sarah, wherever you go, I'll follow." The paperwork for Cambridge was already in motion. My teachers had written glowing recommendations, my essays were polished to perfection, and my test scores spoke for themselves. While she was busy planning her romantic southern adventure with her new obsession, I was securing my escape to something far better. Now, holding that acceptance letter, I felt the first genuine smile cross my face in months. Let her have her third-rate university and her mediocre boy. I was done being anyone's backup plan. Some bridges are meant to be burned, especially when they only lead backwards. My name is Elias Morrison, and until 3 months ago, I thought I knew exactly what my future looked like. It involved Serafina Vale, the girl who'd been the center of my universe since we were 3 years old. Our mothers liked to tell the story of how we met at a neighborhood barbecue, 2 toddlers who immediately gravitated toward each other in that inexplicable way children sometimes do. While other kids fought over toys, Serafina and I shared everything: cookies, coloring books, even my favorite stuffed dinosaur that I'd never let anyone else touch. At 5, we were inseparable playground companions. She was the fearless one, climbing to the top of the highest slide while I waited nervously at the bottom, ready to catch her if she fell. "Don't worry, Eli," she'd call down with a gap-toothed grin. "I'll always come back down to you." By 10, we were that couple that made adults smile knowingly. School field trips meant automatic pairing, science projects were predetermined partnerships, and every school dance found us awkwardly swaying to music we pretended to hate. When other boys started noticing girls, they noticed Serafina, but she only had eyes for me. At 15, our first real kiss happened during a thunderstorm in her family's gazebo. Lightning illuminated her face just before our lips met, and I remember thinking that this was what poets wrote about, what songs tried to capture but never quite managed. She tasted like the strawberry lip gloss she always wore and the promise of forever. "We're going to get married someday," she whispered against my lips, and I believed her with every fiber of my 17-year-old soul. At 17, we were the couple everyone envied. Prom king and queen, valedictorian and salutatorian, the perfect pair who made college plans together and talked about our future with the confidence of people who'd never known. Real heartbreak. We even picked out baby names, for God's sake. But everything changed on graduation day. I was waiting for Serafina behind the auditorium, clutching a pink envelope that contained everything I'd been too nervous to say out loud. Inside was a love letter I'd spent weeks perfecting, along with a promise ring I'd bought with money from my part-time job. Today was supposed to be the day I officially asked her to be mine forever. My fingers were inches from the envelope when a woman appeared out of nowhere. She looked exactly like Serafina, but older, maybe 28 or 30, with the same golden hair and green eyes, but carrying herself with a confidence that present-day Serafina hadn't quite developed yet. She wore an expensive-looking dress and had an engagement ring that caught the sunlight like captured fire. "Don't," she said sharply, and before I could react, she'd snatched the letter from my hands and torn it to shreds, the pieces scattered in the wind like dying butterflies. "What the hell?" I started, but she cut me off. "I'm Serafina," she said, her voice carrying an authority that made me step back. 28-year-old Serafina, to be precise. I've come back to save us all from a terrible mistake. I stared at her, torn between calling security and questioning my own sanity. She looked exactly like my Serafina, down to the small scar on her chin from a childhood bike accident, but there was something cold in her eyes that my Serafina had never possessed. "You're insane," I managed. "Am I?" She turned and pointed across the courtyard to where present-day Serafina was laughing with our classmates. "Look at her, Elias, really look. Do you see how her eyes keep drifting to that boy in the corner?" I followed her gaze and felt my stomach drop. She was right. Serafina's attention kept wandering to Kieran Blackwood, the QUT transfer student who'd joined our class mid-semester. I'd noticed it before but dismissed it as mere politeness. "That's who she's meant to be with," future Serafina continued, her voice taking on an almost religious fervor. "Not you, never you. In 10 years, she'll love him with a passion that will shake the heavens and earth. Every moment she spends with you is time stolen from her real destiny." "You're completely delusional," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. "Am I? Then why did she spend our entire graduation dinner last night talking about how interesting and mysterious Kieran seemed? Why did she volunteer to tutor him in subjects she barely understands herself?" Each word hit like a physical blow because they were true. I'd noticed these things but convinced myself they meant nothing. Now, seeing them laid out by someone who looked exactly like the girl I loved, they formed a pattern I couldn't ignore. Present-day Serafina chose that moment to walk over, her face lighting up when she saw me, but I caught it now, the barely perceptible glance she cast toward Kieran before focusing on me, the slight disappointment that flickered across her features when she realized we were alone. "Elias, there you are. I was looking for you everywhere." She reached for my hands, but her touch felt different somehow, distracted. "Are you ready for tonight? I can't wait to celebrate with you." "Actually," future Serafina interjected smoothly, "I think there's been a change of plans." Present-day Serafina turned, saw her older self, and nearly fainted on the spot. The resemblance was impossible to deny, but where my Serafina was warm and open, this woman radiated calculation and cold determination. "What? Who?" Serafina stammered. "I'm you, 10 years from now," future Serafina said matter-of-factly. "And I'm here to prevent you from making the biggest mistake of your life." She pointed directly at me. "Don't waste another moment on him. Your heart belongs to Kieran Blackwood, and the sooner you accept that, the happier we'll all be." I watched present-day Serafina's face as she processed this information. Instead of the immediate denial I expected, I saw something far worse. Curiosity. Her eyes darted between her future self and me, and I could practically see the wheels turning in her head. "That's ridiculous," she said, but her voice lacked the conviction I desperately needed to hear. "Elias is... Are you?" future Serafina challenged. When you dream about your perfect wedding, whose face do you see? When you imagine the father of your children, who comes to mind first? The silence that followed lasted only seconds, but it felt like hours. In that moment, I saw our entire relationship through new eyes. Every time she'd seemed distant, every conversation that felt forced, every kiss that lacked the passion of our first. "This is insane," I said finally. "Serafina, you can't seriously be listening to this." But she was. God help me, she was. I need time to think," she whispered, not meeting my eyes. That's when I knew. Future or not, this woman had simply voiced what present-day Serafina had been feeling all along. I wasn't her great love, I was her comfortable choice, her safe harbor while she worked up the courage to chase what she really wanted. The realization hit me like ice water. Everything I'd believed about us, about our future, about love itself, all of it was built on a foundation of self-deception. I looked at both versions of the girl I'd loved since childhood, and felt something fundamental shift inside me. The boy who would have fought for her, who would have begged and pleaded and promised to change, that boy died in that moment. "Take all the time you need," I said quietly. "But take it somewhere else." I walked away from both of them, leaving behind the promise ring, the shredded love letter, and 15 years of what I'd thought was destiny. Behind me, I heard future Serafina's satisfied voice. "Now, let me tell you about your real future with Kieran." I didn't look back. The changes started small, almost imperceptible. If I hadn't been watching for them, I might have missed the subtle shift in Serafina's behavior altogether. But once you know someone is capable of betrayal, you start seeing the signs everywhere. It began with the tutoring sessions. "Kieran is struggling with calculus," Serafina announced over lunch, her voice carrying that particular tone she used when trying to sound casual about something that wasn't casual at all. I offered to help him catch up before finals. I looked up from my sandwich, catching the slight flush in her cheeks. "Since when do you care about Kieran's grades?" "Since he asked for help," she said, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. "It's the decent thing to do." The decent thing to do. As if decency had ever motivated Serafina Vale to spend her free time on academic charity work. She was brilliant, yes, but she'd never shown interest in helping struggling students before, especially not male students who looked at her like she was some kind of goddess descended from heaven. "What about our study dates?" I asked, trying to keep the jealousy out of my voice. "We can still study together," she said quickly. "Just, maybe not every day. I want to make sure Kieran passes." That should have been my first real warning. In 3 years of dating, Serafina had never rescheduled our time together for anyone else. Our Tuesday and Thursday study sessions at the library were sacred, a tradition we'd maintained even during her parents' messy divorce and my father's brief hospitalization. But suddenly, Kieran Blackwood's academic success was more important than our relationship traditions. The tutoring session stretched from 1 hour to 2, then 3. When I asked how they were going, Serafina's face would light up with an enthusiasm she rarely showed for her own coursework. "He's actually really intelligent," she'd gush. "He just learns differently than most people. He has these incredible insights into literature. He sees metaphors and symbolism that completely went over my head." I wanted to point out that Kieran was failing 3 classes and hadn't spoken more than 10 words in our English class all semester, but something in her expression warned me off. She looked protective, defensive, like she was guarding something precious. Then came the phone calls. Serafina had always been attached to her phone, but now it seemed to buzz constantly with messages that made her smile in ways I hadn't seen in months. When I asked who was texting, she'd shrug and say, "Study group stuff," or, "Just Melissa being dramatic," but I caught glimpses of a contact labeled simply K that appeared far more frequently than any study group would warrant. One evening, her phone rang during our date at Giuseppe's, the Italian restaurant where we'd celebrated every anniversary. She glanced at the screen and immediately tensed. "I need to take this," she said, already standing. "During dinner?" I asked. "It'll just be a minute." She was already walking toward the exit, phone pressed to her ear. Through the window, I watched her pace back and forth on the sidewalk, her free hand gesturing animatedly as she spoke. Whatever conversation she was having, it was intense, emotional, important enough to abandon our romantic dinner. When she returned 20 minutes later, her eyes were bright with tears she'd clearly tried to wipe away. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Fine," she said quickly. Kieran was having a panic attack about the calculus exam. I had to talk him through some breathing exercises. Breathing exercises, for a math test, at 9 o'clock on a Friday night. The lies were getting more elaborate but also more transparent, and the worst part was watching her face wit. Ian, she told them, there was no guilt there, only irritation that I was asking questions at all. Spring break was when things escalated beyond any pretense of tutoring. I can't go to Cabo with you, Serafina announced 3 days before our planned trip. Something came up. We'd booked this vacation months ago, our families had been coordinating schedules, my parents had given me their blessing to propose during the trip, and I'd already bought the ring. The something that came up better have been life-threatening. What kind of something? I asked. Kieran's family situation got complicated, his parents are getting divorced, and he doesn't have anywhere to go for the break. I can't just abandon him. So bring him along, I said, hating myself for the suggestion but desperate to salvage our plans. That wouldn't be appropriate, she said, and the finality in her voice told me the decision was already made. He needs someone who can focus entirely on helping him through this. Someone who could focus entirely on him, not us, him. I spent spring break alone in Cabo, surrounded by couples and trying to pretend my heart wasn't shattering with every sunset I watched by myself. Meanwhile, Serafina's social media was full of photos from around town, her and Kieran at the art museum, sharing ice cream at the pier, reading together in the park. In every single photo, she looked happier than she'd looked with me in months. When she got back, I confronted her with screenshots of the pictures. This doesn't look like crisis counseling, Sarah. She had the grace to look embarrassed, but only for a moment. He needed to get out, do normal things, it was therapeutic. What about us? What about our relationship? What about it? The question came out sharper than she'd probably intended, but she didn't apologize or take it back. We're solid, Elias. We don't need to spend every waking moment together to prove we love each other. But we weren't solid, we weren't. Ear fracturing, and she was the one wielding the hammer. The final blow came with the university announcement. We were sitting in her car after prom, still in our formal wear, when she casually mentioned changing her college plans. The acceptance letter to Southern Valley University was already on her dashboard. I realized she'd made this decision weeks ago and just hadn't bothered to tell me. You're throwing away Princeton for a school that barely has accreditation, I said, unable to hide my shock. It's not throwing away anything. Southern Valley has a really unique program in comparative literature. It's exactly what I want to study. Comparative literature. She'd never mentioned any interest in that field before. Her entire academic focus had been pre-med, following in her mother's footsteps. This sudden passion for literary analysis coincided suspiciously with Kieran's own academic interests. What about our plans? I asked. We were going to room together at Princeton. We had everything figured out. Plans change, Elias. She turned to face me, and I saw something in her expression that I'd never seen before, pity. She was looking at me like I was a child who didn't understand that Santa Claus wasn't real. I need to do what's right for me. And Kieran, where is he planning to go to college? The slight pause before she answered told me everything I needed to know. Southern Valley has a really strong program for transfers, she said carefully. He might end up there too, eventually. Eventually, which meant they'd already discussed it, which meant this wasn't about her sudden passion for comparative literature at all. You're following him, I said flatly. I'm following my own path, she corrected, but her voice lacked conviction. A path that just happens to lead directly to wherever Kieran Blackwood ends up. Don't be ridiculous. Am I being ridiculous, or am I finally seeing clearly? She didn't answer, which was answer enough. I looked at this girl I'd loved since we were children, this person I'd planned to marry and build a life with, and realized I didn't know her at all. The Serafina I'd fallen in love with would never have strung me along while pursuing someone else. She would have been honest, direct, maybe even cruel, but she wouldn't have made me feel like I was losing my mind for noticing the obvious. This version of her, the one who lied about tutoring sessions and abandoned our traditions for another boy's convenience, this wasn't the person I'd fallen in love with. This was someone else entirely, someone who'd been shaped by the words of a future self who'd convinced her that her heart belonged elsewhere. So what happens to us? I asked quietly. We'll figure it out, she said, but she was already looking out the window, her attention drifting away from me even as we sat in the same car. "You'll come with me to Southern Valley, won't you?" she added, almost as an afterthought. "We always said we'd go to college together." The casual expectation in her voice was what finally broke something inside me. She'd dismantled our entire relationship piece by piece, prioritized another man's needs over mine at every turn, and now she simply assumed I'd abandon my own dreams to follow her south. Just like I always had before. But I wasn't that person anymore. The boy who would have rearranged his entire life for Serafina Vale's convenience had died somewhere between the spring break abandonment and this moment. "Of course," I lied, forcing a smile. "Wherever you go, I'll follow." She squeezed my hand, satisfied with my answer, never suspecting that I'd already submitted my application to Cambridge University and was just waiting for the acceptance letter to arrive. Some people are worth following to the ends of the earth. Others aren't worth following to the end of the block. I was finally learning the difference. The weeks following prom were the longest of my life. Each day felt like walking through quicksand, every interaction with Serafina a carefully choreographed performance where I played the role of the devoted boyfriend while my heart slowly crystallized into something hard and unbreakable. I became a student of her betrayal, cataloging every small cruelty with the methodical precision of a scientist documenting a disease. When she cancelled our traditional Saturday morning breakfast to help Kieran move apartments, I smiled and told her I understood. When she forgot my birthday dinner because Kieran was having an emotional crisis that required her immediate attention, I rescheduled without complaint. But inside, I was keeping score. The nights were the worst. Lying in my bed, staring at the ceiling, I'd replay every moment of our relationship and wonder which parts had been real. Had she ever truly loved me, or had I simply been a placeholder until someone more interesting came along? When she'd whispered, "forever," against my lips during that thunderstorm, had she meant it, or was I just the first boy to pay attention to her? The memories that had once brought me comfort now felt like evidence of my own stupidity. Every "I love you" became suspect, every kiss potentially hollow, every promise of a future together transformed into a lie I'd been too blind to recognize. I started watching her with Kieran whenever I could do so without being obvious. The way she looked at him was devastating, like he was the answer to a question she'd been asking her entire life. Her face would soften when he spoke, her voice would drop to that intimate tone I'd thought was reserved for me, and her entire body would orient toward him like a flower turning toward the sun. She never looked at me that way anymore. Maybe she never had. The realization that I'd been in love with someone who was merely fond of me was like discovering that the ground beneath my feet had always been an illusion. Everything I'd built my identity around, being Serafina's boyfriend, being half of the perfect couple, being loved by the most beautiful girl in school, all of it was crumbling, and I was powerless to stop it. But the worst part wasn't the betrayal itself, it was the gaslighting. "You're being paranoid," she'd say when I asked about her constant texting. "Kieran is just a friend." "You're imagining things," she'd insist when I pointed out how often she brought him up in conversation. "I barely think about him." "You're being possessive," she'd accuse when I asked why our plans always seemed to get interrupted by his needs. "I'm allowed to have other friends." Other friends, as if that's what this was. She made me feel crazy for noticing the obvious, guilty for having normal human reactions to being replaced. Every reasonable question I asked was reframed as evidence of my jealousy and insecurity. Every boundary I tried to establish was painted as controlling behavior. I began to doubt my own perceptions, wondering if I really was as possessive and paranoid as she claimed. Maybe she was right, maybe this was all in my head, maybe I was sabotaging our relationship with my own fears and inadequacies. But then, would come another photo on social media, Serafina and Kieran at some coffee shop I'd never heard of, looking intimate and comfortable in a way that spoke of hours spent together. Or another phone call that she'd take in private, coming back with that glow that meant someone had made her feel special and understood. The cognitive dissonance was torture. My eyes and instincts told me one story while her words told me another, and I was trapped between the two, slowly losing my grip on what was real. Then came the night that changed everything. 3 weeks before graduation, Serafina asked me to take her to see the new romantic comedy at the Paramount Theatre. It was supposed to be our makeup date after she'd missed our anniversary dinner for another one of Kieran's emergencies. I arrived at her house at 7, flowers in hand and hope in my heart that maybe we could recapture some of what we'd lost. But the moment I saw her, I knew something was wrong. She kept checking her phone, her leg bouncing with nervous energy, her responses to my attempts at conversation distracted and brief. Halfway through the movie, her phone started buzzing with urgent frequency. She tried to ignore it, but I could see the stress building in her shoulders, the way she kept glancing at the screen. "Just answer it," I whispered. "It's nothing," she whispered back, but her phone kept lighting up. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. "I'll be right back," she mouthed, and slipped out of the theater. I should have stayed in my seat. I should have trusted her to handle whatever crisis required her attention and return to me like she'd promised. Instead, I followed her to the lobby and heard her voice, low and urgent, through the glass doors leading to the street. "I can't talk right now. I'm with Elias. No, I can't just leave. Kieran, please, you're scaring me." The desperation in her voice was unlike anything I'd ever heard from her. This wasn't the tone of someone talking to just a friend. This was the voice of someone whose heart was breaking for another person's pain. I pressed closer to the door, hating myself for eavesdropping, but unable to stop. "Where are you now? The old pier? Kieran, that's not safe. No, don't say things like that. I'm coming, okay? Just stay where you are and don't do anything stupid." She hung up and immediately dialed another number. "Mom, I need you to pick up Elias from the Paramount Theater. Tell him I had a family emergency." "No, I can't explain right now. I just need to go." A family emergency. Another lie, delivered with the casual ease of someone who'd had plenty of practice. I watched through the glass as she ran to her car, her heels clicking against the pavement, her entire being focused on getting to Kieran as quickly as possible. She never looked back at the theater, never showed a moment's hesitation about abandoning me there. I was invisible to her. Completely, utterly invisible. Her mother arrived 20 minutes later, apologetic and confused, clearly having no idea what family emergency her daughter was supposedly handling. The ride home was awkward and humiliating, filled with Mrs. Vale's well-meaning attempts to make conversation while I sat in the passenger seat, finally understanding that I'd lost Serafina completely. She didn't call that night, or the next morning. When she finally texted me 36 hours later, it was a brief message. "Sorry about the movie, family stuff got complicated. Talk later?" No explanation, no apology that mattered. Just the expectation that I'd be waiting patiently for her to decide when our relationship was worth her attention again. That's when I made my decision, not in anger, not in the heat of the moment, but with the cold clarity that comes from finally accepting an unbearable truth. I was never going to be her priority. I was never going to be the person she ran to in a crisis or the one she thought about first when making plans. I was the safe choice, the backup plan, the comfortable option she kept around while she figured out what she really wanted. And what she really wanted was standing on a pier somewhere, threatening self-harm to get her attention. I looked at my acceptance letter to Cambridge, hidden in my desk drawer since the day it arrived. I'd been too scared to commit to it, too hopeful that Serafina would somehow choose me over her obsession with Kieran. But hope was a luxury I could no longer afford. That night, I filled out the acceptance forms, arranged for my student visa, and put down the deposit that would secure my place at one of the world's most prestigious universities. While Serafina was playing savior to a boy who'd learned to weaponize his own fragility, I was choosing myself for the first time in years. The irony wasn't lost on me. She thought she was following her heart towards some great love story. In reality, she was chasing after someone who would never love her the way I had, completely, devotedly, without reservation or condition. But that was her choice to make, and this was mine. By the time she realized what she'd given up, I'd be 3,000 miles away, building a life that had nothing to do with Serafina Vale or her romantic delusions. The boy who would have fought for her was gone. In his place was someone harder, smarter, and infinitely less willing to settle for being anyone's second choice. I sealed the envelope containing my acceptance forms and walked to the mailbox in the rain, feeling lighter with every step. For the first time in months, I was moving towards something instead of trying to hold on to something that was already gone. Tomorrow, I'd start pretending that I planned to follow her to Southern Valley University. I'd smile and nod and play the role of the devoted boyfriend right up until the moment I disappeared from her life completely. After all, she'd taught me how to lie. It was time to put those lessons to good use. The graduation party was held at Madison Reed's Lake House, a sprawling estate where half our class gathered to celebrate the end of high school and the beginning of whatever came next. I arrived alone, having told Serafina I'd meet her there after she finished helping Kieran with something important. Another lie, another crisis, another reason why I came second. But tonight was different. Tonight, I had Cambridge University acceptance papers hidden in my car and a plane ticket booked for next month. Tonight, I was free in a way I hadn't been since I was 17 years old. The party was in full swing when I arrived, music pounding, drinks flowing, and the kind of reckless energy that comes with knowing childhood is officially over. I found myself actually enjoying the conversations, the laughter, the simple pleasure of being social without constantly watching the door for Serafina's arrival. Around 10 o'clock, she finally appeared with Kieran in tow. He looked pale and shaky, clinging to her arm like she was the only thing keeping him upright. Serafina guided him to a quiet corner, her entire attention focused on his well-being while I watched from across the room. "Trouble in paradise?" asked Jake Morrison, following my gaze. "Something like that," I muttered. "Man, I don't get it," Jake continued. "If I had Serafina Vale, I wouldn't be letting some emo kid monopolize her time. That dude's been following her around like a lost puppy for months." Following her around, as if Kieran was the pursuer in this situation rather than the pursued. The irony would have been funny if it weren't so pathetic. I was debating whether to approach them when Marcus Chen burst through the patio doors, his face flushed with excitement and alcohol. "Holy shit, you guys have to see this," he shouted over the music. "Kieran just totally lost it by the lake." The music stopped. PPD. Every conversation halted. All eyes turned to Marcus as he gestured wildly toward the water. I was out there making out with Sarah when this crazy screaming starts. Kieran standing on the dock, yelling about how nobody understands him and how he might as well just end it all. Then he starts talking about some girl who's too good for him and how he's tired of being ignored. My blood turned to ice. Every head in the room swiveled toward Serafina, who had gone completely white. "He said he was going to jump," Marcus continued, oblivious to the drama he was creating. "Sarah and I tried to talk him down, but he told us to fuck off and leave him alone. Then he started crying and saying he was sorry to someone named Sarah." The silence that followed was deafening. Serafina stood frozen in the corner, her hand pressed to her mouth, while around the room our classmates began to whisper and stare. "Someone should call 911, suggested Ashley Martinez. "Where is he now?" demanded Connor Walsh. "Still out there, I think," Marcus said, "unless he actually went through with it." The crowd began to move toward the patio doors, but Serafina was already pushing through them, running toward the lake with a desperation that told everyone watching exactly how she felt about Kieran Blackwood. I followed, along with half the party, as she sprinted down the moonlit path to the water. In the distance, I could see a figure standing at the end of the pier, small, solitary, and trembling. "Kieran!" Serafina screamed. "Don't you dare!" She ran onto the wooden dock, her heels clicking against the planks, her dress flowing behind her like something from a movie. Even in crisis, she was beautiful. Even while chasing after another man, she took my breath away. "I can't do this anymore," Kieran called back, his voice carrying across the water. "I'm tired of pretending I don't love you. I'm tired of watching you with him when I know we're meant to be together." The words hit me like physical blows. He was in love with her. This whole time, while I'd been watching her chase him, he'd been suffering the same torment I was experiencing, loving someone who belonged to someone else. Except she didn't belong to me anymore. Maybe she never had. "You don't have to pretend anything," Serafina said, her voice gentle but firm. "But this isn't the answer. Please, just come away from the edge." "Why?" he asked. "So I can keep watching you plan a future with someone else. So I can keep being your charity case, your tutoring project, your consolation prize." The parallels were almost too painful to bear. His words could have been mine, his situation a mirror of my own. The only difference was that his love was openly acknowledged while mine was being quietly discarded. "You're not a consolation prize," Serafina said, moving closer. "You're—" She stopped, seeming to realize that whatever she said next would be heard by dozens of our classmates recording everything on their phones. This moment would be dissected and analyzed and gossiped about for months to come. "You're important to me," she finished lamely. Important, not loved, not cherished, not the center of her universe. Important. Kieran laughed bitterly. Important enough to abandon your boyfriend at the movies when I called, important enough to change your entire college plan, but not important enough to choose. Behind me, I heard gasps and whispers as our classmates began to understand what they were witnessing. This wasn't just a suicide threat, it was a public confession that exposed every secret that Serafina had been hiding. "It's not that simple," she said. "It is that simple," Kieran shot back. "You either love me or you don't. You either want to be with me or you want to be with him. Stop trying to have both." The crowd pressed closer, sensing drama, but I found myself backing away. I couldn't watch this anymore. I couldn't stand there while the girl I'd loved since childhood publicly wrestled with choosing between me and someone else. Because the wrestling itself was the answer. People don't agonize over choosing between someone they love and someone they don't. They only struggle when both options matter to them. I was almost back to the house when I heard the splash. Screaming erupted from the dock, Serafina's voice, high and panicked, calling Kieran's name. I turned to see her running back and forth on the pier, while several of our male classmates dove into the dark water. "Call 911, someone shouted. "I can't see him. There, by the pilings." I watched from the lawn as they pulled Kieran's limp form from the lake, as Serafina dropped to her knees beside him, as she pressed her mouth to his in what everyone would later call CPR, but looked remarkably like the kiss she'd never given him while he was conscious. The ambulance arrived with sirens wailing and lights flashing, turning the entire scene into a nightmarish carnival. Paramedics worked over Kieran's still form while Serafina held his hand and whispered things I couldn't hear but could easily imagine. "I love you. Please don't leave me. I'm sorry I wasn't brave enough to choose you." The things she'd never said to me, the things she'd never felt for me. As they loaded Kieran into the ambulance, Serafina climbed in beside him without a backward glance. She didn't look for me in the crowd, didn't seek reassurance or comfort from the boyfriend she'd been with for 3 years. Her entire world had narrowed to the boy on the stretcher, and I had become irrelevant. I drove home in silence, my phone buzzing with messages from classmates wanting to know if I was okay, if I'd known about Serafina and Kieran, if I needed someone to talk to. I ignored them all. At home, I sat in my car in the driveway and finally allowed myself to acknowledge what I'd been denying for months. This relationship was over. Had been over, probably, since the day future Serafina appeared and gave present-day Serafina permission to pursue what she'd secretly wanted all along. My phone buzzed with a text from her. "At hospital with Kieran. He's stable but unconscious. Don't know when I'll be home. Sorry about tonight." Sorry about tonight. As if this were just another inconvenience, another scheduling conflict, another case of her priorities being elsewhere. I typed back. "Glad he's okay. Take care of yourself." What I didn't type was, "Don't bother coming back to me. Don't bother with explanations or apologies or attempts to salvage what we had. We both know it's over." Instead, I got out of my car, walked into my house, and began researching flights to London. If I was going to disappear from Serafina Vale's life, I was going to do it completely. But first, I was going to let her show me exactly who she really was. I was going to let her make her choice in full view of everyone who mattered, and then I was going to use that choice to justify every decision I made afterward. Because I had a feeling that Kieran's dramatic leap into the lake was just the beginning, and I wanted to be very, very far away when the rest of this story played out. Some bridges burn themselves, all you have to do is wait and watch. The hospital corridors smelled like antiseptic and broken dreams. I hadn't planned to come, but something compelled me to witness this chapter's end in person. After 3 days of Serafina camping out in Kieran's room, posting updates about his condition like she was his girlfriend instead of mine, I needed to see the final performance. I found her in the waiting area, her designer dress wrinkled and her perfect hair a mess. She looked up when she heard my footsteps, and for a moment, hope flickered in her eyes. "Elias," she breathed. "I'm so glad you're here." "How is he?" I asked, taking the seat across from her. "Better. The doctors say he'll make a full recovery." She reached for my hand, but I pulled back slightly. "I'm sorry I haven't called. It's been so chaotic, and I wanted to make sure he was okay before." "Before what?" I interrupted. "Before you figured out how to spin this?" She flinched. "That's not fair." "Isn't it? You abandoned me at a movie theater to rush to his side when he called. You changed your entire college plan to follow him, and now you've spent 3 days holding vigil at his bedside while your actual boyfriend gets updates via text message." "He needed me," she said quietly. And I didn't? The silence stretched between us, filled with everything we'd been avoiding for weeks. Finally, she looked at me with tears in her eyes. I never meant for this to happen. Which part? Falling for someone else or getting caught? Before she could answer, a voice interrupted us. Visiting hours are over, but I suppose you can stay a few more minutes. I turned to see an older woman who looked exactly like Serafina, down to the same green eyes and golden hair. But where present-day Serafina looked exhausted and conflicted, this woman radiated cold satisfaction. You, I said, recognizing the future version who had started this whole nightmare. Hello Elias, she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I told you this would happen. Present-day Serafina stared at her older self in horror. What are you doing here? Cleaning up loose ends, future Serafina replied. You've been hesitating too long, and it's time to make the final choice. She pulled out her phone and showed us a video that made my blood run cold. It was security footage from the lake, showing Kieran's suicide attempt from multiple angles. In crystal clear detail, we watched him look around to make sure he had an audience, position himself carefully at the edge of the dock, and then deliberately jump into the shallow water near the shore, not the deep end where someone actually trying to drown would go. He planned this, I whispered. Of course he did, future Serafina said dismissively. Kieran learned early that dramatic gestures get attention. The fake suicide attempt was just his way of forcing Serafina to publicly choose him. Present-day Serafina grabbed the phone, watching the footage with growing horror. But he said he loved me. He said he couldn't live without me. He said what he needed to say to manipulate you, her older self replied. Just like he's been doing for months. The tutoring sessions where he pretended to struggle with concepts he already understood. The panic attacks that coincidentally happened whenever you had plans with Elias. The family crisis that required you to abandon your spring break trip. Each revelation hit like a physical blow. I watched Serafina's face crumble as she realized how thoroughly she'd been played. None of it was real, she whispered. Oh, it was real, future Serafina said with a cruel smile. His feelings anyway, he really is obsessed with you, but love and obsession aren't the same thing, despite what romantic movies tell us. She turned to me then, her expression shifting to something almost sympathetic. You want to know what happens if you stay, Elias? If you forgive her and try to make this work? I didn't answer, but she continued anyway. You'll spend the next 10 years watching her chase after him. She'll marry you eventually, but she'll never stop wondering, what if? Every fight you have, every moment of doubt, she'll think about Kieran and the grand passion she gave up, and when you finally have children, she'll look at them and wish they had his eyes instead of yours. Stop, present-day Serafina whispered, but her older self wasn't finished. Do you know what happens in the future I come from? She divorces you for him when you're 28, leaves you broken and destroys your business to fund his artistic pursuits, and when he finally shows his true colors, the gambling, the affairs, the complete inability to love anyone but himself, she realizes she threw away the only person who ever truly loved her. The hospital waiting room felt like it was spinning around me. Every word was a dagger, but I could see the truth in present-day Serafina's face. She wasn't denying any of it. That's not going to happen, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? You're already choosing him over Elias at every turn. The only reason you're conflicted is because Elias is safe and comfortable, and Kieran is exciting and dangerous, but novelty wears off, Serafina, safety doesn't. I stood up slowly, feeling like I was moving through water. I need some air. Neither version of Serafina tried to stop me as I walked toward the exit. In the hallway, I passed Kieran's room and saw him through the open door, sitting up in bed, very much awake, scrolling through his phone with a satisfied smirk. Our eyes met, and his smirk widened into a genuine smile. He raised his hand in a little wave, like we were old friends sharing a private joke. That's when I understood the full scope of what had happened. Kieran hadn't just manipulated Serafina, he'd manipulated the situation to destroy our relationship completely. The fake suicide attempt wasn't about getting her attention, it was about making her choose publicly, in front of everyone who mattered. And now, watching her older self reveal his deception, he was probably enjoying the final act of his performance. I walked back to the waiting area, where both versions of Serafina were locked in heated argument. You have to let him go, future Serafina was saying. He deserves better than being your consolation prize. He's not a consolation prize, present-day Serafina shot back. I love him. Do you, or do you love the idea of him? The comfort, the security, the way he worships you? I cleared my throat, and they both turned to me. Present-day Serafina's face was streaked with tears, while her older self looked grimly satisfied. I have something to say, I announced, and I want you both to listen carefully, because I'm only going to say this once. I looked directly at the girl I'd loved since childhood, the person I'd planned to marry and build a life with, and felt nothing but cold, clear certainty. You're right, I told future Serafina. She doesn't love me, not the way I love her, maybe she never did. Elias, no, present-day Serafina whispered, reaching for me. I stepped back. People who love each other don't make each other question their worth. They don't abandon each other for dramatic phone calls or change life plans without discussion. They don't hesitate when asked to choose. I was confused, she pleaded. I didn't understand what I was feeling. You understood perfectly, I replied. You wanted him, but you wanted to keep me as backup in case he didn't work out. You wanted to have your cake and eat it too. I pulled out my phone and showed them both the boarding pass I'd purchased. I'm leaving for Cambridge University next week. I got accepted months ago, but I kept it secret because I thought we had a future together. The color drained from her face. You're leaving the country? I'm leaving you, I corrected. There's a difference. Future Serafina nodded approvingly. Smart choice. In 10 years, you'll be grateful you walked away now. Maybe, I said, but that's not why I'm doing it. I'm doing it because I finally learned something important. You can't love someone into loving you back. You can't be perfect enough or patient enough or understanding enough to change someone's heart. I looked at present-day Serafina one last time, memorizing her face before I let her go completely. I hope you get everything you think you want, I told her. I hope Kieran becomes the man you imagine he could be. I hope your grand passion is everything the movies promised it would be. And if it's not? She whispered. I shrugged. That's not my problem anymore. Future Serafina began to fade around the edges, becoming translucent and unreal. Elias, she called out as she disappeared. Thank you for setting us free. And then she was gone, leaving only present-day Serafina and me in the sterile waiting room of a hospital where her true love was recovering from his performance. Please don't go, she begged. We can work this out. I'll choose you. I'll come to Cambridge with you. No, I said simply. You'll resent me for making you choose, and I'll never trust that you chose me for the right reasons. This is over, Sarah. It's been over for a long time. I walked away from her then, leaving her alone with the consequences of her choices. In the parking lot, I deleted her number from my phone, blocked her on social media, and drove home to finish packing for the life I was about to build without her. Behind me, through the hospital windows, I could see her silhouette in the waiting room, still and solitary, finally understanding what she'd lost. But that was her story now, mine was just beginning. 5 years later. The notification appeared on my phone while I was reviewing research proposals in my Cambridge office. Serafina Vale has sent you a message request on LinkedIn. I stared at the screen for a long moment, my finger hovering over the delete button. 5 years of silence, 5 years of building a life that had nothing to do with her, and she was reaching out through professional networking sites like we were old colleagues who'd lost touch. Curiosity won over wisdom. I opened the message. Elias, I know I have no right to contact you after all this time, but I needed you to know that I understand now. Everything you said at the hospital was true. Everything your future self warned me about came to pass. Kieran destroyed me, just like you said he would. I lost everything chasing after someone who was never capable of love. I'm sorry doesn't even begin to cover it, but I'm sorry anyway. I hope you found happiness. You deserved so much better than what I gave you. Sarah. I closed the message without responding and went back to my work. But throughout the day, I found myself thinking about those words. Kieran destroyed me. Part of me, a very small part, felt sorry for her. The larger part felt nothing at all. That evening, I was having dinner with Anna Rodriguez, the brilliant biochemistry professor I'd been dating for the past 2 years. She was telling me about her latest research breakthrough when my phone buzzed with a news alert. Local man arrested for fraud and domestic violence, the headline read. Below it was a photo I recognized. Kieran Blackwood, looking haggard and desperate in an orange jumpsuit. Anna noticed my distraction. Everything all right? Just some news from home, I said, setting the phone aside. Nothing important. But later that night, alone in my flat, I found myself reading the full article. Kieran had been running investment scams, using his charm and manufactured vulnerability to bilk money from wealthy women he met through online dating. When one of them discovered his deception and threatened to expose him, he'd beaten her badly enough to hospitalize her. The article mentioned that he'd previously been married to local socialite Serafina Vale Blackwood, but that the marriage had ended in divorce after she'd discovered his affairs and gambling debts. According to court records, she'd lost her family's business trying to fund his lifestyle and pay off his creditors. I should have felt vindicated. I should have felt satisfied that karma had finally caught up with them both. Instead, I felt empty. Their destruction didn't undo the years of pain they'd caused me, didn't validate the choice I'd made to leave. What validated that choice was everything I'd built since. The next morning, I was in my lab when my research assistant rushed in with barely contained excitement. "Professor Morrison," she said breathlessly, "the review board approved your grant proposal, full funding for the next 5 years." I looked up from my microscope, letting the news sink in. 5 years of guaranteed funding meant my research into sustainable energy solutions could move forward without interruption. It meant stability, recognition, the chance to make a real difference in the world. "That's excellent news, Sarah," I said, and meant it. As she left, I turned back to my work, but my mind wandered to the boy I'd been 5 years ago, heartbroken, betrayed, convinced that losing Serafina meant losing everything that mattered. That boy couldn't have imagined this life: respected career, meaningful work, genuine relationships built on mutual respect rather than childhood habit. That afternoon, Anna stopped by my office with coffee and the kind of smile that still made my heart skip. "Celebrating your grant approval?" she asked, settling into the chair across from my desk. "Among other things," I said, reaching for her hand. Such as how far I've come from who I used to be." She studied my face with the careful attention she brought to everything that mattered to her. "Want to talk about it?" I told her about Serafina's message, about the news article, about the strange emptiness I felt, where anger used to live. "You've healed," Anna said simply when I finished. "That's what that emptiness is, the absence of pain. You don't need revenge when you've already won." "Won what?" "Your life back, your self-respect, your future." She squeezed my hand. "You chose yourself when she wouldn't choose you, and look what you built from that choice." She was right, of course. The ultimate revenge wasn't seeing Serafina and Kieran destroy each other, it was becoming someone who no longer needed revenge at all. That evening, we attended a faculty dinner where I was being recognized for my research contributions. As I stood at the podium, looking out at colleagues who respected my work and cared about my success, I thought about the parallel universe where I'd followed Serafina to Southern Valley University, where I'd spent years trying to win back someone who'd never been fully mine to begin with. In that universe, I'd have missed all of this: the career, the recognition, the relationship with someone who chose me every single day without hesitation or doubt. After the dinner, Anna and I walked along the Thames, her hand warm in mine, the city lights reflecting off the water like scattered stars. "I have something to tell you," she said, stopping beside the bridge where we'd shared our first kiss 2 years ago. "Oh?" She turned to face me, her expression serious, but her eyes bright with happiness. "The University of Edinburgh offered me a position, department head, my own lab, unlimited research budget." My heart sank. That's an incredible opportunity." "It is," she agreed. "But I'm not taking it." "Anna, you can't turn down something like that for—" "I'm not turning it down for you," she interrupted. "I'm turning it down for us, because I've seen what happens when people make unilateral decisions about their futures. I want us to decide together." The difference hit me like lightning. Where Serafina had changed her entire college plan without consulting me, then expected me to follow, Anna was turning down her dream job to build something with me. "What if we both went?" I suggested. "I could apply for positions there." "What if we did?" she smiled. "Want to build a life together in Scotland, Professor Morrison?" I kissed her then, right there on the bridge, with the Thames flowing beneath us and the future spreading out like an endless horizon. 6 months later. The letter arrived at my parents' house, forwarded through several addresses before finding me in Edinburgh. It was handwritten on expensive stationery, the kind Serafina had always favored for special occasions. Elias, I know you won't respond to this, and I don't expect you to. I just needed you to know that I saw the article about your engagement. Anna looks lovely, and from what I could find about her research, she's brilliant too. You found someone who deserves you, and I'm genuinely happy for you both. I also wanted you to know that I finally understand what real love looks like. It looks like choosing someone every day, like building something together instead of tearing each other apart, like being proud of their success instead of threatened by it. You tried to show me that for 3 years, and I was too selfish and stupid to see it. I hope Anna knows how lucky she is. I hope you both have everything I was too broken to give you. Please don't let my mistakes make you doubt what you have now. You deserve all the happiness in the world. Sarah. I read it twice, then showed it to Anna over breakfast. How do you feel about that? She asked after reading it. Grateful, I said, surprising myself with the honesty. Not for what she put me through, but for what it taught me. I know the difference now between someone who loves the idea of you and someone who loves you completely. Anna reached across the table and took my hand, her engagement ring catching the morning light. And which am I? You're the person who chose Scotland with me instead of choosing Scotland despite me, I said. You're the person who celebrates my success instead of competing with it. You're the person who makes me want to be better without making me feel like I'm not enough as I am. That's a very romantic way of saying I'm completely smitten with you, Professor Morrison. Completely smitten works too, Professor Rodriguez. We were married 3 months later in a small ceremony overlooking Edinburgh Castle. My parents flew in from America, her family came from Spain, and our colleagues from the university filled out the guest list. It was everything a wedding should be, intimate, joyful, focused entirely on the commitment we were making to each other. As I watched Anna walk down the aisle toward me, radiant in her simple white dress, I thought briefly about the boy who'd planned to propose to Serafina in Cabo all those years ago. That boy couldn't have imagined this moment, this woman, this life built on mutual respect and genuine partnership. During our vows, Anna promised to choose me every day, to build our dreams together instead of separately, to love me not despite my flaws, but including them. When it was my turn, I promised to never make her question her worth, to celebrate her success as enthusiastically as my own, to be the partner she deserved rather than the one she settled for. As we kissed to seal our marriage, I felt the final ghost of Serafina Vale fade away completely. She'd been my first love, but Anna was my true love, the difference between wanting someone and choosing them, between needing to be loved and deserving to be loved. Later, during the reception, I stepped outside for a moment of quiet reflection. The Scottish Highlands stretched out before me, wild and beautiful and full of possibility. Somewhere across the ocean, Serafina was living with the consequences of her choices while Kieran served his prison sentence. Their story had ended in destruction and regret. Mine was just beginning. When Anna found me on the terrace, she slipped her arms around my waist and leaned against my back. No regrets, she asked softly. About what? About the path that led you here, all that pain, all that heartbreak, do you wish it had never happened? I considered the question seriously, thinking about the boy I'd been and the man I'd become. No, I said finally. If I hadn't learned what I didn't want, I might not have recognized what I did want when I found it. And what do you want, Professor Morrison? I turned in her arms, looking down at this brilliant, beautiful woman who'd chosen to build a life with me. This, I said simply. Exactly this. The story that began with betrayal and ended with justice wasn't really about revenge at all. It was about learning that sometimes the best response to being someone's second choice is becoming your own first priority. And sometimes, when you do that, you discover that you were never the supporting character in someone else's story, you were the hero of your own, just waiting for the right moment to begin.